Many fans come to the park hoping for a lot of offense, and on some occasions, whether it's their team or not, they have been given such an opportunity, as what starts as just a blowout turns into an absolute massacre. So let's look at every time an MLB team scored more than 25 runs.
Totally sports-esque. Major League.
We start with the 26 club, and we start way back in the early days of baseball in 1911. So early, in fact, that the RBI as a stat didn't even exist yet. What makes it kind of tricky to know exactly how many runs cross the plate, but the box score is still there. The Reds and the Boston Rustlers met on this day, with Cincinnati third baseman Eddie Grant going 2 for 5 with a double and belting his only home run of the season. In fact, it was one of just 5 home runs he would hit in his entire 10-year career. Right fielder Mike Mitchell went 5 for 6 with a double of his own, and for Boston starter Cecil Ferguson, it was a bit of a nightmare. He did not record a single out before the Reds erupted for 7 runs in the first inning, setting the tone as they would win 26-3. This was the only season they were called the Boston Rustlers before switching to the Braves with the Bees in between, before moving to Milwaukee, then of course Atlanta. This game in 1922 between the Cubs and Phillies started as a beatdown, but it turned into maybe the wildest slugfest in MLB history. The Cubs exploded for 10 runs in the second, and they added 14 more in the fourth, jumping out to what seemed like an untouchable 25-6 lead. But the Phillies were not finished. The Cubs managed just one more run the rest of the way, while the Phillies staged a furious rally, scoring 17 runs, including 14 between the 8th and 9th, to nearly pull off the impossible. But they fell short by 3 runs in a 26-23 game, the highest scoring game in modern MLB history. Charlie Hollister and Hack Miller each drove in 6 for the Cubs, while Russ Wrightstone and Kurt Walker played at 4 for the Phillies. And it's not on here because of the final score, but the Cubs and Phillies played another wild game 57 years later at Wrigley Field that would end 23-22, and one I made a video about that you can go ahead and watch. The two sworn enemies that fought each other across the country met when they were still in New York, as on April 30th, 1944, the New York Giants and Brooklyn Dodgers met in what became known as the Phil Weintraub game. The Giants' first baseman finished a single shot at the cycle and drove in 11 runners, 14% of his 77 RBIs for the entire season. Hall of Fame catcher Ernie Lombardi chipped in 7 RBIs of his own, going 3 for 5 with a pair of doubles. The Giants did much of their damage with 2 outs, scoring 11 runs in those situations, as the Giants beat the Dodgers 26-8. Those 11 RBIs by Weintraub tied Tony Lazzari for the second most in a single game, behind Jim Bottomley and Mark Wooden, who both recorded 12. 4 years after that, in 1948, the Cleveland Indians and the Browns did not meet on a football field, but had a football-like score. Cleveland jumped out to a 15-0 lead before the Browns finally got on the board in the 4th inning, and the Indians kept piling on. Hall of Famer Lou Boudreau and pitcher Gene Bearden each drove in 4 runs, with Bearden homering in the first as part of a 4 for 6 day at the plate. And on the mound, Bearden only allowed 1 run on 4 hits over his 7 innings, as Cleveland went 14 for 22 with runners in scoring position, as Cleveland would beat the Browns 26-3. This is still the year Cleveland won the most recent World Series title, as Lou Boudreau also won MVP. The Phillies are here again in 1985, except this time they're on the other side, in a game against the Mets that was essentially over after 2 innings, with the Phillies already leading 16-0. They tacked on 5 more runs in the 5th, 1 in the 6th, and 4 in the 7th. Leadoff man Vaughn Hayes became the first player to homer twice in the 1st, and he drove in 6 runs. Well, Bo Diaz and Glenn Wilson each had 3 RBIs, with Diaz hitting 3 doubles, and Wilson collecting 2 of his own. Mets starter Tom Gorman recorded just 1 out before being relieved by Calvin Giraldi, who just had to wear it, surrendering 10 runs on 10 hits over 1.1 innings, as the Phillies beat the Mets 26-7. The Mets ultimately finished 23 games ahead of the Phillies, but that night, they were 19 runs behind. Coors Field was bound to have an appearance here, and it came in 1995 when it was at its most extreme in its first year. And it was the Chicago Cubs who did the damage, exploding for 7 runs in the first inning, all charged to Rocky starter Brett Saberhagen, who had just been acquired from the Mets for this stretch run. Saberhagen recorded just 1 out before his day was done, and the rout was on. Luis Gonzalez led the way with a double, a home run, and 6 RBIs, while Sammy Sosa hit a home run and drove in 4 of his own. Scott Bull hit a double, a triple, and 4 RBIs, as just like the Phillies, the Cubs won 26-7. This is Coors Field's only appearance here, though the Angels did score 25 in 2023. But the early days of Coors was like the Wild West for offense, but pushing the fences back and putting baseballs in dehumidifiers has led to Coors being by far and away the least pitcher-friendly, to just being the least pitcher-friendly. This won't be the first time these two teams appear, as on April 19, 1996, the Texas Rangers met the Baltimore Orioles at the ballpark in Arlington. The game actually stayed competitive until the bottom of the 8th, with the Rangers leading 10-7. but then they would erupt for 16 runs to blow the game wide open. Juan Gonzalez, Kevin Elster each doubled and homered, with Gonzalez driving in 6, Elster 5, and Clark 3. Dean Palmer also powered the offense with 2 home runs and 5 RBIs. As just like the Cubs and Phillies, the Rangers won 26-7, with the Rangers outscoring the Orioles 43-16 over the 3-game series. These two teams both ended up in the playoffs, and the ballpark in Arlington routinely ranked among the least pitcher-friendly park, along with another park where these two teams would meet, as we'll get to later. Hoping to reach 50 wins, on September 9, 2004, the Kansas City Royals made sure they would in the game against the Tigers at Comerica Park. Despite the huge run total, the Royals hit just 1 home run, which was a through-run blast by Angel Barroa. Barroa also tripled and led the team with 5 RBIs, becoming the first in AL history to record 6 hits and 6 runs. The offense was spread out with 4 players driving in 3 or more runs, Joe Randa, Alberto Castillo, David DeJesus, Ruben Gote, and Calvin Pickering each hitting a double, while the other 19 hits were all singles. And the winning pitcher that day was some 20-year-old rookie named Zach Greinke, giving up 3 runs on 6 hits over his 5 innings. And that was actually the first game of a doubleheader, as the Royals were shut out in Game 2, losing 8-0. So if they would have split up their runs for the day, they could have finished the season with 59 wins. We move on to the 27 club, which has just 1 member. The Indians are that 1 member, as in July of 1923, they did what they did to the Browns to the Red Sox, only they added another run. Cleveland managed to score in every inning, with their biggest outburst coming in the 6th, when they put up 13 runs. Wróblewski drove in 6, doubling twice, while Rick Stevenson added 5 RBIs with 3 doubles. Hall of Famer Stan Kavelski started for the Indians, allowing just 2 runs and 7 hits over 6 innings. While Boston's Lefty O'Doul, the Japanese Baseball Hall of Famer, came in relief and was charged with 16 runs, with only 3 being earned, as the Indians won 27-3. This was the Red Sox 5th of 15 straight seasons under 500, with that first season in 1919 being Babe Ruth's last year on the team. We move on to the 28 club with 2 members, as in 1929, the Phillies appear here again in their game against the Cardinals. The Cardinals set the tone early by putting up 10 runs in the first, and by the 5th, they led 13-3, and they would add another 10 runs in that frame, finishing with a 5-run outburst in the 8th. Hall of Famers Jim Bottomley and Chick Hafey led the offense, Bottomley hitting a home run and driving in 7, while Hafey went 5 for 7 with 2 doubles and 5 RBIs. Cardinal starter Fred Frankhouse allowed 6 runs on 17 hits, but he got plenty of support, and he still pitched a complete game, as the Cardinals won 28-6, setting franchise records for both the Cardinals and the Phillies, one much better than the other. We go forward almost a century for a recent memorable game between the Blue Jays and the Red Sox at Fenway Park. The game was broken wide open in the 3rd, with Toronto already leading 6-0. Jarren Duran lost sight of the ball in center field, and it would land on the warning track. Ramil Tampia sprinted home, making it 10-0, as he hit the first inside-the-park grand slam in 5 years. And it just got worse. Toronto added 4 runs in the 4th, 11 in the 5th, 2 in the 6th, and 1 in the 9th, setting a franchise record with 28 runs and 29 hits. Lourdes Gurriel Jr. would record a career-high 6 hits and 5 RBIs, with Tapia and Danny Jansen each driving in 6, with Jansen hitting 2 home runs. Matt Chapman also homered and drove in 4, as the Blue Jays won 28-5. Those 28 runs allowed, setting a new franchise record for the Red Sox. And we move on to the 3 members of the just below 30 club. Much better than the game just talked about for them. In 1950, the Red Sox set the better franchise record in their game against the St. Louis Browns. The onslaught began the 2nd inning with 8 runs, and they continued to score the next 3 innings as well. After a brief pause in the 6th, the Red Sox poured on 7 more runs the next 2 innings. The lineup was powered by Hall of Famer Bobby Doerr, who smashed 3 home runs and drove in 8, while Jobu, who would later play in another 29-run game, added 2 home runs and 7 RBIs. And another Hall of Famer in Ted Williams also added 2 home runs and 5 RBIs, as the Red Sox won 29-4, recording 60 total bases in the game, a record that still stands. This came right after they beat the Browns 20-4, as they joined the 1925 Pirates as the only teams in modern MLB history to record 20 or more runs in consecutive games. The St. Louis Browns relocated to Baltimore in 1954, and they became the Orioles. And here's another team that would soon relocate, as in 1955, the Chicago White Sox set their franchise record in a game against the Kansas City Athletics. Manny Minoso and Sherm Lawler each homered and drove in 5 runs, with Lawler going deep twice. However, the star of the game was right fielder Bob Neiman, who hit 2 home runs and drove in 7. While Drapu was a part of the Red Sox 29-run onslaught, and even the starting pitcher Jack Harshman would also hit home runs. Kansas City starter Bobby Shantz could not make it out of the 2nd, giving up 9 runs in just 1 2/3. as the White Sox won in dominant fashion 29-6. In our most recent one here, the Atlanta Braves put on a show, but there was no one there to see it. As in the game in September of 2020 against the Marlins, Adam Duvall was the star of the night, blasting 3 home runs and driving in 9. His second 3-homer game in just 8 days. The second player to do that in just that span. The Braves went deep 7 times in total, with home runs from Ronald Acuna Jr., Ozzie Albies, Travis d'Arnaud, and Freddie Freeman, who would all join Adam Duvall. The 29 runs set a new National League record, and the 29-9 final score gave us baseball score gone. That probably won't happen again. And this looked familiar to Braves third base coach Ron Washington and Braves outfielder Nick Markakis. And that's in relation to our finale.
It's time for the moment you've been waiting for!
We finished with the ultimate baseball slaughter, and currently the only member of the 30 Club, though 8 teams did score 30 in the 1800s. But in the 21st century, on August 22, 2007, the Texas Rangers met the Baltimore Orioles at Camden Yards in the first game of a doubleheader. Interestingly, the Rangers were scoreless through the first 3 innings, while Baltimore put up all 3 of their runs early on. But then the Rangers' offense would erupt. Starting with the 5-run fourth, the big scoring burst came the final 4 innings, highlighted by Marlon Burr's grand slam in a 9-1-6 and Travis Metcalf's grand slam, plus Jared Saltalamacchia's 2-run home run in a 10-run 8th inning. Texas capped the rout by adding 6 more runs in the 9th, as both Saltalamacchia and Ramon Vasquez hit 2 home runs and drove in 7 RBIs, as the Rangers won 30-3. As is the case with all these, they capitalized on runners being in scoring position, going 18 for 25 for a 720 clip in those situations. And just like the Tigers and Royals did in 2004, they played the second game, not starting until 9, as the first one ran a little long. And the high-scoring game on both sides, the Rangers picked up their second win of the game, winning 9-7. So on the day, the Rangers scored 39 runs on 40 hits. However, they could not keep up that pace, as they averaged 5 runs per game on the season, with an outlier that was pretty clear. No team has reached 30 cents, and this was the first time since the Chicago Colts did so in 1897, when they scored a record 36 runs, including the St. Louis Browns. The Orioles as a franchise appeared here 4 times, and never on the side they want to be on. Though only one was at Camden Yards, like the ballpark at Arlington, it routinely ranks amongst the least pitcher-friendly parks, which is why those fences were moved back before 2022. Then they brought them in before the season, which may have been a mistake. This coming 3 years after they set the record for the most home runs given up in a season at 305. And you can watch my video about team stat records below for more.